Hi guys! Okay, so we are going to continue the stories. Last time we did the diagnosis story, so if you haven't seen that yet, go ahead and go watch that. Today we are going to do her whole birth story, and Eric is gonna be in this video.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. Okay, so a couple things that I did want to add. When I was talking about the diagnosis, I didn't say whether or not we had a baby shower. We did. I ended up telling a bunch of people at the baby shower about her diagnosis, so that it wasn't the most fun baby shower in the world. Everybody was kind of crying at the baby shower. So we ended, we were going to go to Denver, and so the night before the night I went into labor, we were saying goodbye to everybody. We went to Eric's dad's church that night with them to say bye, and when we were standing outside about to leave, I had some cramping and I thought it was gas. I was trying not to fart, I thought, in front of his dad and stepmom, and I was like, oh, please don't fart in front of them. But we came home and we went to bed, and when I was sleeping I woke up, and like 5 seconds after I woke up, and I woke up all of a sudden, right after that my water just gushed out. And so when people say that they thought they peed themselves, I never really fully understand that, because it was obvious that my water was breaking. But I slapped him on the chest and I was like, my water just broke, and he was like, oh no, and he
ran out of the room and didn't really know what to do next.
He jumped up and ran out, and I was like, okay. So I got up and I waddled over to the bath mat, and I was thinking, like, I'll let this kind of subside, I'll get some pants on and we'll go to the hospital. And I called my doctor while I was standing on the bath mat. Well, I called the doctor's office, and the doctor that was on call, I said, my water just broke, what do I do? And he was like, well, you need to go to the hospital. I was like, yeah, but can you get me to Denver? Because we were going to Denver the next day. And he was like, no. So I was standing there waiting, and Eric came back in.
In the meantime of flipping all the lights on and moving all the stuff out of the way.
He had stools all over.
On the phone with the dispatch, they came in and they started telling me to shout out orders for her to lay on her side, and
so he was like, lay on your side. And I was like, and I was shaking and I was laying on my side, and they came in with the gurney, and they were like, we need you to get on to the gurney. And I was like, but I don't have any pants on. And he was like, they're gonna see a lot more of you tonight. And I was like, and they didn't let him on the ambulance, so he drove.
I jumped in the car and actually beat the ambulance to the hospital.
He got there before we did, but while I was in the ambulance, I was having a panic attack, and they had to put oxygen on me and everything. And so we got in there, and I think you were still in the lobby because we hadn't gotten there yet when I first got there.
In Montrose, yeah.
Yeah. And they were arguing with the front desk. I came in an ambulance, and she's like, she needs to fill out paperwork. And he was like, no. And I was like, I pre-registered, and we had done like a tour, a class. I had 2 birth plans.
Yeah, we had a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And I was like, I pre-registered. And they kept arguing, and I was like, I pre-registered. And he was, the EMT was like, we're going upstairs right now. Forget about your papers. And so we went up the elevator, and I think they actually let you into the elevator, didn't they?
Yeah, once they saw that I came in, I got to go to the employees only elevator with them. Yeah,
so he went in the elevator with us up to the room, and we got up to the room, and it was like 2 or 3 dilated.
I think 2 at that time.
Yeah, it was 2 centimeters dilated. My water just kept coming. The poor nurse, she was like an older nurse, and I felt terrible because she kept having to change the bedding like every 5 minutes. And
I had those absorbent pads that you normally use with trying to potty train a dog.
Thanks.
Those are getting filled pretty quick.
But the doctor that was on call finally came in his pajamas.
Yeah.
Because he's super professional like that. And he said that he couldn't get us to Denver, so I was like, well, if I need a C-section, are you going to do that? And he was like, no, I'm not going to risk you for a baby that's going to die anyway. And so we asked if we could be taken to Grand Junction, which is an hour away from us. And he said that he was going to make the call, but
that took forever.
Yeah, I think he took his time. He was waiting for me to go into labor because my water broke, and I think he was hoping that it would just happen instead of wasting resources, but it didn't. It took 7 hours to get up to Junction. And
it took, 7 hours, 5 hours to hear that the ambulance was finally on its way, and
one ambulance
about
broke down.
right about that 7 hour mark, for whatever reason, wherever they were coming from, one ambulance broke down, so they had to call a second one to come all the way down to Montrose again, which it's only an hour away.
Yeah.
And we were both sitting there thinking that, even with where she was at dilation wise and water broke, that we could have put her in the car, had her up there, in
like
a
3
fraction of
times
the
by
time.
then.
So
Yeah, but they finally got there. He got to Junction before the ambulance
I
again.
got to the hospital faster than the ambulance did.
And then we got up to labor and delivery, and the doctor that delivered Sophia came in, and we asked her if she would be willing to do a C-section, and she said yes, because she would want the same thing if she was in the same situation. And we asked to be transferred to Denver again, and they said that Denver, which I'm thinking it was the cardiologist that we had said that they wouldn't do anything differently than Grand Junction. And so we were like, well, our whole family can come to Junction. They can't all drive 5.5 hours away to Denver. So we decided to stay there.
We chose to stay there.
Because if they weren't going to do anything else, what would be the point in trying to have everybody drive over there if something were to happen to Sophia?
Yeah. And that was the main deciding factor, is that if the treatment plan was going to be the same, which was basically comfort care, which is they just make the kid comfortable until they pass away. So we made that decision that if it was going to be the same whether we were in Junction or whether we were in Denver, that if it was going to happen that night, we wanted to make sure that family was around, because we probably wouldn't have been able to deal with that by ourselves.
So we decided to stay, and when we got there, my best friend was there, and the nurse was checking me in, and she was like, "Is this your this is your second miscarriage?" And I was like, "I'm 35 weeks pregnant. This isn't a miscarriage. I'm in labor." And my friend was so angry. I actually forgot about that until after, because everything happened so fast, and I was all drugged up from the C-section. But so we were in there, and around like 11 or so, they gave me Pitocin to try to hurry it along, because I had only dilated to 3, and I had been in labor for almost 12 hours at that point, and nothing was really progressing. My contractions were still like 5 to 10 minutes apart, and
they had all the monitors on her belly to make sure that Sophia's heart rate was steady and still there,
and it was fine. And then I got the Pitocin. They said that I could eat. They brought me macaroni and cheese. I took 1 bite of macaroni and cheese, and the nurses were like whispering, and they left really fast, and then they came in, and everybody had scrubs on.
Yeah, that's when the doctor came in and threw a set of scrubs at me and said, put those on if you said that you wanted to do a C-section to deliver this baby in case she went into distress. And we said yes. She's like,
we have to go now. And
so they cleared out the room. Everybody
was in the hall.
Yeah, it was kind of an emotional period, because we didn't know what was going to happen as we were coming out of her room and towards the double doors for the operating room. We just thought that this is the end. Like, we're not going to know, we're not going to see our kid, we're not going to, this could be the end of it.
And my mom hadn't gotten there yet, so I was, she lives in Washington, so she was still driving, and I was freaking out because I mean, I love Eric's family, and that was great to have them there too, but I wanted my mom and my siblings to be there too, because we thought that this could be the only time that anybody got to see Sophia, so.
Yeah, I wanted everybody to see her.
So I was freaking out again, and they had to give me oxygen again, but it was weird because when we were going down the hall, Eric's dad and stepmom's pastor was there, and that was nice of him to come, but he was praying at me as we were being rolled down, and that was like giving me a panic attack. It wasn't giving me any comfort at all, but it went from this kind of drama scene to when we rolled in there, the nurses were like dancing to the radio and stuff.
They had some rock station on.
It was the weirdest thing in the world, and they usually don't let the dads in for the spinal thing for the C-section, but they let him in because I almost passed out on this short little nurse. And you have to lean forward to get it, and I almost fainted on her. So they let Eric come in, and
her basically over my shoulders,
yeah.
and I was crouched down as far as I could, so she was basically just leaning on me, so that way they could do the shot that they needed.
And then I laid back on the table, and they were doing everything, and I was like moving back and forth, and they strap you to the table, and we thought that she was 5 pounds. They said she was measuring at 5 pounds. And my little brother Max was born at 5 pounds. So I was like, 5 pounds is doable. But then they took him, and they said she's here. And they said she's beautiful. Yeah. Then they took him and didn't tell me anything. And so I was strapped to the table laying there, and I heard her teeny cry, and I had been...
Yeah, and as I was going over there, I was kind of trying to look at, they had, I don't know what it is, those little incubator looking things.
Oh, yeah.
The trays that have the heating lamps and the heated bed. So I was looking at that to see if I could see her, and I just saw a mountain of blankets, and I'm like, where's my kid? They said that she's right here. As I got closer, I saw a little hand come up, and I was like, wow, that's small.
Yeah.
And I finally got over to there and saw, and she was just this smallest little thing you've ever seen. Super cute. But it just had worried me because with how much she wasn't really crying or wasn't moving a whole lot as they were trying to clean her off, so that probably didn't help with it. But it worried me that, by the time I get Sophia over to Liz, that could be the end of it, and it was a huge emotional roller coaster, for sure.
And they took him, and I was strapped, and the only person there with me was the anesthesiologist, and I was like, well, what's going on? And she was like, I don't know. And I was like, well, is she alive? And she was like, I don't know. And I was just like, not that I could do anything, I was numb from like the chest down, and I was strapped to a table, but I started like flinging my hands, and I don't know what I was trying to do, but then he finally came over, and she was like...
Yeah, like holding, her hand was here, and her feet maybe went to my elbow, so she was...
She was so tiny.
Very small.
And I was like, she's too small.
Yeah.
That's like the first thing that I said, but then they let her come into recovery with me, which they usually don't do, and she actually scored high on her APGAR. I didn't know that for a while. The APGAR score is the score they give babies for how well they respond to reflex stuff, and she got like a perfect score. But they let her be in recovery, and she was on my chest and everything, and then we finally got to go back into the room. I don't even know how long it was, because I was like...
It seemed like hours, but it was probably only like 10-15 minutes after the procedure. And I was on
morphine or something, so I don't remember everything, but we got back into the room, and everybody was in there, and I don't remember the exact sequence of these events, but I know that they wanted to bring in a Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep photographer, and
those photographers usually only come in when they think that the kid's about to die, so it's more of a way to kind of capture the moments, finding the silver lining in all of these terrible events. But it's a way so that way, if you want pictures that are of a better quality and the little moments that you want to capture, that you want to remember, if your kid doesn't make it, that's usually what they're there for.
And I didn't want them. They're a great resource, but we didn't want them because
we had talked about it beforehand, but then being in the moment, we definitely changed our mind because we didn't want to basically be posing as our kid could be potentially dying.
It's just not something that we wanted, but they kept pushing it.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want this. And they were like, well, the photographer's already on the way. And I was like, if she dies before she gets here, I don't want the photographer
we
in
didn't
here.
want pictures of her after.
And so she got there and that was just the worst. That was the worst. I mean, we have free newborn pictures, but they're depressing.
Everything that had kind of been done in that room was pressured on us, good or bad. Some is a good thing we did, some I'm glad that we didn't.
Yeah, and then the pediatrician came in, and Sophia was kind of yellow. A lot of kids born at this elevation have jaundice. Yeah, and she was premature. Yeah. And so the pediatrician came in, and Sophia had tried to also latch on, but she turned purple and blue because she didn't have the suck, swallow, breathe, and she was a preemie, so she was super tiny, so it was just too much for her. And the pediatrician came in, and we asked if we could put her under the Billy lights for her jaundice, and she was like, well, I don't see the point in doing that.
It'd be a waste of resources.
And then we were like, well, can we give her a feeding tube, like get her help with the feeding, because she wasn't able to. And she was like, well, you don't need to feed her. She's not going to be hungry, so I don't see the point in doing that.
She's never tasted food, so she's not going to know what hunger is. And at that point, we had asked if we could get her transferred over to the NICU to get either the NG tube, which is a tube that goes through the nose, down the throat, and into her stomach. And they said that for the beginning that procedure would probably be enough to kill her. And on top of all that, in pretty much any time we tried to get her help to get to the NICU, they basically responded back to us with, what's the point? We don't see the point. It's a waste of resources. She's going to die anyways. And the bigger one was, if she had been admitted to the NICU, we wouldn't be able to go in there with her. So she'd be by herself.
True. Because, I mean, we didn't know that.
Yeah.
We didn't know that a lot of these things, obviously the feeding tube thing wasn't true at all, but we would have been able to stay with her in the NICU also and we were alone at that point, so that's another thing. Our family members who were nurses or had premature babies were not in the room with us.
They all had left the room because right around that time was right when we got into the room from the recovery room.
I think they asked to talk to us by themselves anyway. And so she kind of took advantage of the fact that we were new parents and that we had never been through this.
Yeah, we had no idea.
Yeah, and so they did that, and then our family was in there. And was it the same night that she got the Tylenol? Was it the first night?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most everything bad happened
the
her first night.
Her oxygen levels had started dropping.
Yeah.
And she had a heart condition, and her oxygen levels kept dropping, and
they had her hooked up to that incubator monitor that shows the pulse, the oxygen, and I think her breaths per minute.
Yeah.
Just all the stats that they need. And we were just watching the oxygen number go down, which normally is 95 and above for most average
people.
Yeah, so anybody that doesn't have a health issue for their heart. And it just, I don't think there was one time that it was above 90 while we were in there. And I remember me specifically because I'm very big on those things, watching the number.
Yeah,
we just watched it go down and down and down. And I mean, it went from 70 and then 60 and then 40 and all the way down to where it said about 17. And I had asked the nurses, do we need to worry about that? And they just said, no, went over there and turned the monitor off.
And they took her, and we didn't know until she was 2 months what her oxygen levels did after that. And she had been crying and crying and crying and crying, and she was probably hungry because, and they also said she wouldn't poop, and so she pooped, and I took a picture, and we were cheering, and it was...
Yeah, my brother, normally we call him Foo-Foo, it's an old name, but for that, he's kind of known as Uncle Poo-Poo, because he was the only one that after he had held her, she pooped. And everybody else had their turns holding her and passing her around from person to person. So I definitely think that. If you're watching this, Ryan, we appreciate that.
Thanks for making her poop.
Yeah.
But, so she had been crying, and so the nurse decided to bring in Tylenol.
Yeah, we asked if there could be anything done for pain.
Yeah, and so they brought in Tylenol, and she didn't have the suck swallow breathe like we said, and she just shot it into her mouth. And so
at that point in time, she started coughing, choking, and turned a very, very bad shade of grayish purple.
And she started dying. And she was barely breathing, and I don't know why they brought me a stethoscope to listen to her heart slow down, and it was barely beating, and everybody was around us, and I remember yelling at his stepmom because she was like, "You're gonna have an angel baby," and I was like, "I don't want an angel baby," and
I mean, we understand it in the circumstances, but we weren't ready to let go yet.
And she was laying on me, and I remember I just kept blowing on her to get her to breathe, and I kept saying, "Please, like, don't go." And
and even through all this, I mean, if it had happened that she did pass away, I mean, even though we didn't want the angel baby, we didn't want to say goodbye, we would have rather that have happened than to continue the rest of her life being in that kind of state where always in pain, not able to be a kid.
Right,
and it's one of those things that you can plan for however much you want, but once you're in the moment, your plans just disappear.
And the doctors, everybody was just standing there, and they weren't doing anything, even though it was their fault. It was happening.
Yeah.
She wasn't just dying for no reason. They did this, but I don't even know how long it was. It seemed like it was forever that this was happening, and then all of a sudden she coughed, and
she coughed, and then
she was back.
I think it was my stepmom and maybe one other person. I know my stepmom for sure said that she saw
your aunt
something.
Your Aunt Sandra said
or
that.
My aunt. A couple of people that they saw some thing above her,
orb. I think they saw little orbs of light or something around her.
So I don't know if it's a superstitious thing or what, or if it wasn't the sun, because it was.
It was in the middle of the night.
Yeah, but something weird happened, and she kind of came out of it.
And she was back.
Yeah.
And then we stayed up. They wanted me to sleep, but I didn't sleep, and he didn't sleep.
Yeah,
we hadn't slept since my water broke.
We both, I think by the time we realized it, both of us hadn't eaten or slept for well over 48 hours.
And so we stayed awake the whole time, and my mom wasn't there yet because that was still the first night. A lot happened the first night.
Yeah.
But everybody, his dad and stepmom, they slept on the floor. My aunt sat in a dolly and slept sitting up. And
my aunt and her boyfriend were
back to back,
leaning into each other to stay up. And
there were people sitting on the couch too, because that's why they... But everybody was just there.
And it was awesome to have friends and family members be there with us, for us, and just if we needed anything, they were ready to help. And
I don't know if we could have done that without everybody.
And that's been the biggest thing, is being able to get help. And I'm definitely one of those people that I don't like to get help. to me, it feels like a sign of weakness, and I don't like that feeling. But you know, it's one of those. Even if you're watching this and you think I'm gonna be Mr. Strongman, when you're in that, you can't.
No.
It's your kid.
And
you need help, and I had to swallow my pride, just like anybody else would probably had to. And it was. I'm glad that I did, because it helped me be able to cope with it a lot easier than I would have been able to.
But we stayed for the full 3 days.
Yeah.
And then my mom got there and they slept on the floor too she got there the next morning or the middle of the night?
It was the middle of the night.
Yeah, it was all kind of a blur.
Yeah.
But then they told us that we had to go on hospice and we had to sign a DNR to be able to really be released. And a DNR is a do not resuscitate, because if we were going home and something happened to her on the road, that if we called an ambulance, they needed to know that they were not to do any CPR on her. And luckily Eric had thrown the car seat in the car, because I wasn't sure if I wanted him to bring it, because I thought, well, if something's going to happen to her, I don't want to drive home with an empty car seat. Well, luckily he did. She was too small for it, but we had to pack blankets around her. I mean, none of it was like safe. Yeah, none of it was safe, but they didn't really care.
Yeah, it got to especially towards the end, it got to the point where they just didn't care. I mean, the nurses were great. They were helping about as much as they were able to.
Yeah.
The
one nurse, she had helped me shower, and she checked on Sophia while I was in there, and we started giving formula to Sophia. We were putting it on her lips and she was licking it off. I asked for formula because I couldn't pump anything out, and we're not just gonna let her not eat. It was just not something that you naturally do as a parent. You don't just, okay, she's not gonna eat. But the nurse saw that we were doing that, and she brought a syringe in, and Sophia ate by syringe, if you don't know, until she got her feeding tube.
Yeah.
And she would suck the syringe down by herself, so she had a really powerful suction when she learned how to eat. But when we left, she was only eating 5.5 mLs a day. And if you don't know,
which is not much.
Yeah, 30 mLs is an ounce of milk. So she was eating like less than a quarter of an ounce a day. So we were going to leave, and I couldn't sign it. He had to do a lot of stuff that I just couldn't do it, and so he signed it. And
that's going back to like how we said, especially in the first night with everything, all the advice of going on hospice, with the DNR, with even being a new parent. I didn't know if I had installed the car seat correctly, so I asked if the nurses could help me. Look, we're not allowed to.
They couldn't do anything. They weren't.
I mean, we were, by the time we had gotten down there, I asked the nurse, I was like, I really want to make sure that this is safe enough. So she was able to, they didn't want the doctors to see, because I guess they're, policy-wise, aren't supposed to do a whole lot for helping, because then they could be held accountable if something did go happen, which is understandable.
Yeah.
But it just scared the hell out of me, because this little tiny doll of a baby.
Teeny little.
Yeah.
But we got home, and hospice was there like 5 minutes after we got home.
Yeah.
And they started asking about like funeral arrangements, and I asked them if we could talk about that later, because there's just, everything happened so fast. And then the pediatricians came, and I hated the doctor for a while, because she was saying, oh, I know how you feel. My son has autism. And I was like, not really the same thing. And then she was like, well, don't worry. After a few months, you can have another baby after she dies.
Yeah.
And they were just, and then we asked about a feeding tube again, and they said, well, we had multiple doctors tell us it would kill her. I don't know why they kept saying that,
With her size, it was kind of believable, and
But now knowing it's not.
ran out of film.
Yeah. Okay, so that was the first weekend, and I mean, we could probably do like a million videos on everything that happened to her.
Yeah, we can do more videos about later on in other appointments if
Yeah.
you're interested.
But so that was Sophia's birth story. If you do have any questions, you can leave them in the comments or send us a message on Team Sophia.
Facebook.
But I know this was a long video, but it was a long weekend, so
Yeah, it was, a lot happened.
Yeah.
There's probably some stuff we might have left out because it's with going through what we went through. A lot of it kind of got blocked out just
Yeah.
from our own body's natural defense against stressful stuff that happens.
And I was on a lot of medication,
So that doesn't
so I don't
help
remember
either.
everything either.
Because lack of sleep, medication, lack of food, you kind of forget a lot. Those are all the big points that we can definitely remember.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot more, like I said, that we had forgotten, and if we remember more, we can post them on here, Facebook, or wherever.
Yeah, but so this video will probably go up before Sophia's birthday, but her third birthday is on the 26th, and
It's Tuesday.
yes. So this is kind of an emotional time. Most people think of their kids' birth as the happiest day of their lives, and unfortunately, it really wasn't for us.
It was.
I mean, her birthday is now. But
It was the happiest moment because we got to become parents, which is one thing we wanted to do. But it was also the worst because
we thought that we were going to be saying goodbye at the same time we were meeting her, and he was the most positive. He kept saying like she's going to come and meet us, and I was pretty pessimistic about everything, but he's always been the one that helped me get through the most. Like everybody did, but you're the you're the rock. The wind beneath my wings.
not much of a wind.
But I guess if you're new, you want to see more of Sophia's little shenanigans. Hopefully she gets a little bit more comfortable on camera soon. That's our dogs again, so if you hear a little snapping again, they get excited. But you can subscribe to us, and we'll be putting out more about Sophia's first year. If you guys are interested, just let us know. But we will see you guys next time. Bye.